It was supposed to be an ordinary first day. The kind where you show up on time, meet your new coworkers, maybe get a feel for the office or the factory, and go home at the end of the day with a sense of accomplishment. But that was before the place changed. And when I say changed, I don't mean in any ordinary way. I mean it became something else. It started the moment I stepped inside. There was this weird energy in the air, thick and suffocating. The building smelled of old wood, dust, and something off. I couldn't place it. I'd just been hired as an assistant manager at a small, seemingly normal office building on the outskirts of town. It had been vacant for a while, and when I first arrived, the receptionist told me it was just a fresh start for the company. Everything seemed fine at first. But then, there were moments when the atmosphere seemed to warp, as if the very air had a weight to it, pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. The moment I stepped in, the door creaked loudly behind me, and I swear I heard someone whisper my name. But no one was there. I brushed it off as my imagination. It was probably just nerves. But as the day wore on, strange things started to happen. Small things at first, things that could easily be explained away, papers moving on their own, lights flickering, until they weren't so easy to ignore anymore. I walked down the dimly lit hallway to my office, my new office. The door was ajar, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw something dart across the room in my peripheral vision. I froze. Maybe it was just the flickering of the light outside, casting strange shadows on the walls. But then I heard it, footsteps behind me. Slow, deliberate, as if someone was following me, matching my pace. I spun around, heart pounding, but the hallway was empty. No one. Just the flickering lights casting long, grotesque shadows across the floor. It was unsettling. My skin prickled with unease. I quickly stepped into my office and shut the door behind me, locking it for good measure. The last thing I needed was to be caught in a situation I couldn't explain. But the feeling didn't go away. The air felt colder, heavier, and I couldn't shake the sensation that someone, or something, was in the room with me, watching, waiting. I glanced at the clock. It was barely 10:30 in the morning. The first day had barely begun, and already, I felt like I was losing control. I opened the drawer of my desk, hoping to distract myself, when I felt it, an ice-cold breath on the back of my neck. My hand froze. My body went rigid with fear. The breath came again, softer this time, but unmistakable. I turned around slowly, heart hammering in my chest. The room was empty. Nothing. But the air was thick. Heavier somehow. I tried to rationalize it, thinking it was just the air conditioning, but I knew deep down that it wasn't. Something was wrong. Very wrong. It wasn't long before I started hearing other noises. Subtle at first, scraping sounds from the walls, faint whispers, the flicker of the lights above me, but they grew louder with each passing hour. The feeling of being watched, of being surrounded, grew more intense. By the time the clock struck 12 p.m., the whole building felt alive. The walls seemed to groan under the weight of something unseen, something ancient. A low hum filled the air, vibrating through the floorboards, like the sound of machinery deep below the ground. It was unsettling, like the building was awake, aware of my every move. I couldn't concentrate. I needed a break, some fresh air. So I decided to step outside for a while. But as soon as I left the office and stepped into the hallway, I saw something that stopped me dead in my tracks. The elevator. It was open, but the lights were off, and it wasn't supposed to be used. The sign clearly stated that it was out of service, but the doors were wide open, as if inviting me in. I stood there for a moment, staring at it, wondering if I should step inside. I should have just ignored it and walked away, but something about it called to me. Something in the air told me to step forward, to see what was hidden inside. I hesitated. But then, a faint voice echoed through the hallway, so soft, so faint, I could hardly make out the words. It was my name. "Help me," the voice whispered again. "Please, help me." I froze in place, every nerve on edge. The hairs on the back of my neck stood straight up, and I felt the blood drain from my face. Without thinking, I took a step toward the elevator, my body moving against my will, drawn by some unseen force. The moment my foot crossed the threshold, the door slammed shut behind me. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. I was trapped. The elevator descended slowly, the hum of the cables and machinery below me growing louder, the lights flickering in and out as I descended deeper into the building. The air grew colder as I went lower, and the lights flickered again, casting eerie, erratic shadows on the walls. My breath came in short, panicked gasps. I could feel something moving in the dark with me. Suddenly, the elevator came to a screeching halt. The lights went out entirely, leaving me in complete darkness. My heart raced in my chest, and the silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of my own breathing. Then, I heard it. A soft rustling sound, like footsteps, coming from the corner of the elevator. I wasn't alone. The hairs on the back of my neck prickled. I felt the cold presence of something standing right beside me, its breath on my face. I tried to move, but my feet wouldn't budge. My body felt frozen in place. I couldn't see it, but I could feel it, its eyes boring into me, its presence suffocating. "Help me," the voice whispered again. It wasn't just a voice. It was a feeling, a plea, a desperate cry that echoed through my very soul. It came from the walls, from the elevator shaft, from the very foundation of the building. Suddenly, a flash of light illuminated the space for a fraction of a second, and in that instant, I saw it. A face. A pale, hollow face, with hollow eyes and a twisted, contorted smile. It was right in front of me. I screamed. But before the sound could escape my throat, the elevator jerked violently, and everything went dark again. The elevator shot back up, faster than I could comprehend, until it reached the ground floor with a violent thud. I stumbled out of the elevator, my heart racing. The lobby was empty. I looked around, confused, heart still pounding in my chest. The receptionist wasn't at her desk. The office was silent. It felt like nothing had happened, like no time had passed at all. But I knew better. Something had changed. I could feel it in the air. The building wasn't what it seemed. And I wasn't alone anymore. To be continued. I stumbled out of the elevator, my body still shaking, my heart pounding in my ears. The lobby was eerily silent, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. It wasn't just the empty space, it was the absence of sound, the way the air felt thick, as if it had been holding its breath, waiting. The receptionist's desk was empty. The once bustling office now felt like a forgotten place, abandoned, hollow. I took a few steps forward, hesitant, unsure of what to do. I had to get out of here. My mind was screaming at me to leave, to run, to never look back. But there was something in the air that kept me rooted to the spot. Something in the very walls of the building, in the shadows, urging me to stay, urging me to find out more. A low hum vibrated through the floor, like the faintest tremor beneath the surface. The lights flickered above me, casting the room into brief flashes of blinding white light, followed by deep, suffocating darkness. My breath caught in my throat as I turned toward the door leading to the back offices. There was a faint sound coming from beyond the door. A tapping. a rhythmic pattern. Tap, tap, tap. It was a slow, methodical sound, as if someone was knocking, no, scratching, at the door. I wasn't sure why I moved toward it. Something inside me told me to stop, to turn around and leave, but my legs moved on their own. Each step felt like 1,000 pounds, my feet dragging across the floor as if the building itself were trying to keep me from escaping. I reached for the door handle, and just as my fingers brushed against the cold metal, the sound stopped. For a split second, everything was still. Then, the door creaked open on its own. I hesitated. The room on the other side was dark, but I could just make out the outline of the furniture, the desks, the filing cabinets, all standing in eerie silence. The dim glow from the flickering lights outside barely illuminated the space, casting long, warped shadows that seemed to stretch and twist unnaturally, like they were alive. I stepped inside. The floorboards groaned beneath me, protesting my every movement. My breathing was shallow, my hands trembling as I reached for the light switch. But before I could flick it on, I felt something brush against my leg. Cold. So cold, it felt like ice against my skin. I jerked back, my heart leaping in my chest, but there was nothing there. Just the darkness and the suffocating silence. Then I heard it. A voice. It wasn't the whisper from earlier. No, this was different. It was a raspy, gurgling sound, like someone trying to speak from the depths of water. Get out! I froze. My pulse thundered in my ears as I turned slowly, scanning the room. There, in the corner of the office, a shadow seemed to ripple. It didn't have a shape, no clear form, just an inky blackness that moved against the grain of the shadows. And in the center of that blackness, two glowing eyes blinked open. I felt my blood turn to ice as they locked onto me. The eyes weren't human. They were too large, too wide. And they glowed with a pale, sickly light, like the moon reflecting off a pool of stagnant water. They watched me, pierced me with an intensity that I couldn't escape. I didn't know how long I stood there, paralyzed by the gaze of that thing, but I knew I couldn't stay. I had to run. I bolted for the door. My hands fumbled with the handle, my fingers slick with sweat, but I managed to yank it open and stumble into the hallway. The moment I was outside the room, the heavy air seemed to lift, just slightly. My breaths came in ragged gasps as I backed away down the corridor. But when I turned to run toward the front entrance, the lobby was gone. The door was no longer where it should have been. Instead, there was a long hallway, stretching off into the darkness, leading to God knows where. The walls were no longer pristine, they were cracked, as though the building had aged centuries in the span of minutes. The once clean floors were now covered in dust, cobwebs draped across the corners, and strange stains marked the walls. I looked around, frantic, trying to make sense of what was happening. Had I somehow wandered into another part of the building? Was it just some twisted maze designed to confuse me? But that didn't make sense either. The building hadn't been like this when I arrived. It had been normal. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself, but the air was thick again, suffocating, heavy. I felt the eyes on me, those cold, inhuman eyes from the office. They were watching from the shadows, following me as I moved. A low groan echoed from behind me. I spun around, but saw nothing. Only the hallway stretching endlessly in front of me. And then, I heard it. A laugh. Soft at first, like a whisper in the wind. But as it continued, it grew louder, more distinct. It wasn't a human laugh. It was wrong. It was distorted, like it was coming from a throat that hadn't seen the light of day in years. The sound crawled into my bones, making my entire body tense, every muscle frozen in terror. I turned toward the sound, but there was no one. The hallway was empty. I had to get out. I started running, each step echoing louder in the silence, my breath coming faster, my heart racing in my chest. The hallway stretched on, far longer than it should have. I looked behind me. The dark shape, the thing, was following me. I couldn't see it clearly, but I could feel it. It was there, moving just out of reach, its presence pressing against me like a suffocating weight. The laugh came again, now closer. I could hear the footfalls. It was running after me. Panic surged through my veins as I pushed myself harder, running as fast as I could, but no matter how much I ran, I couldn't escape it. The hallway seemed to stretch farther and farther ahead. The walls narrowed in, closing in on me, and the ceiling seemed to lower. The floor trembled beneath my feet, as though the very foundation of the building was shaking with malevolent energy. And then, the lights flickered. Everything went black. I couldn't see a thing. My breath hitched in the dark, my hands outstretched, trying to find something, anything, to hold on to. I tried to take a step forward, but my foot caught on something. I fell, tumbling forward, my body crashing against the cold, hard floor. A harsh, rasping breath filled the air, and I knew, without a doubt, that it was right above me. It was above me. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. My mouth was dry, my throat tight. I could hear it moving, the sound of its presence crawling over the floor, getting closer, closer. Then, a cold hand touched my shoulder. I froze, my body locked in place. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The thing's breath came closer, hot and rancid against the back of my neck. The voice whispered again, this time so close, it felt like it was inside my head. You shouldn't have come here. I closed my eyes, but the darkness didn't help. The sound, the presence, it was everywhere. And just as I thought I might lose my mind, the lights flickered back on. I gasped for air, eyes wide in panic, but the hallway was gone. The lobby was back. And there, standing in front of me, was the receptionist. Smiling as if nothing had ever happened. She didn't seem surprised to see me. In fact, she looked pleased. Almost happy. I was wondering when you'd come back, she said, her voice sweet but chilling. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. The world around me blurred, the edges of reality beginning to fray as my mind slipped into chaos. What had I just seen? What was going on? The receptionist's smile stretched wider, and I suddenly realized, she wasn't human star. To be continued. I stood frozen in the lobby, staring at the receptionist, my mind struggling to comprehend the shift in reality around me. The world felt like it had been pulled out from beneath my feet, the floor swaying slightly, like I was standing on the edge of a dream that was about to collapse. Her smile, it wasn't right. It was too wide, too unnatural, and the glint in her eyes, though calm, was almost predatory. Her lips parted in a way that felt more like a grimace than a smile, and her teeth, I could see them now, sharp and white, almost gleaming in the dim light. You look like you've seen a ghost, she said, her voice unnervingly calm. I couldn't answer. The words I wanted to say, the scream that was lodged in my throat, all felt distant, muffled by an invisible force. The lobby, everything around me, seemed to be spinning slightly, the air growing thicker with each passing second. It felt as though the very walls were closing in, pressing down on me. I opened my mouth, but the words wouldn't come. Her gaze, though still friendly, never left mine, as if waiting for me to speak, or perhaps to react. You really should have stayed away, you know, she continued, her voice soft but carrying an unsettling undertone. "This building, it has a way of drawing people in." She paused, letting the words hang in the air like smoke. "Most never make it out." I could feel my legs shaking, my body trembling uncontrollably, but I couldn't move. Something invisible was holding me in place. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might break free of my chest. My breath came in short, shallow gasps, and I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. What are you?" I finally managed to choke out, my voice hoarse, barely a whisper. Her smile stretched wider, impossibly wide, and for the first time, I noticed that the skin around her lips seemed to stretch too, almost like it was unnatural. The edges of her mouth looked raw, as though the flesh beneath had been peeled back. "I'm the guardian," she said, her tone almost affectionate, as if I should understand. "The one who keeps them here. The ones who wander too far, stay here, with me." She glanced around the lobby, her eyes scanning the air, as though she were checking for something. "No, someone." "You're not human," I whispered, the words slipping out before I could stop them. My eyes darted to the elevator behind me, the one I had come from. It looked so normal now, like nothing had happened at all. No flickering lights. No strange distortions. It almost seemed welcoming. She let out a low, breathy chuckle. "No. I suppose I'm not. But neither are you you?" She stepped forward then, her feet making no sound on the floor, as though she were gliding. She was too close now. Close enough for me to smell her, an unnatural, metallic scent that sent bile rising in my throat. Her breath was too cold, like the wind on a frozen night. "You're here now," she said, her words slow and deliberate. "And the building is hungry." I took a step back, but my feet wouldn't move. It was as if the floor itself had frozen over. I could feel my legs giving way, my body on the verge of collapse, but the terror asterisk was holding me upright, paralyzing me with fear. I couldn't breathe. Her hand, too smooth and too white, reached out and gently cupped my cheek, sending an icy chill through my entire body. I wanted to scream, to pull away, but I was trapped in place. The coldness of her touch burned through me, deep into my bones, a biting, hollow cold that no amount of warmth could ever chase away. And then, the lights flickered again. But this time, they didn't just flicker. They shuddered. The entire building seemed to groan under the weight of something ancient and unspeakable. A vibration shook the floor beneath me, and the walls bent, yes, bent, as if the building itself was alive, breathing. I turned toward the hallway, the one I had come down earlier. But now, it was different. The walls were distorted, stretching at odd angles, as if they were made of liquid. The once orderly hallway was a twisted maze of impossible geometry, the doors that had once lined the corridor now gone, replaced by a series of shifting, jagged edges, like something had been gnawing at them from the inside. No, this can't be happening, I muttered to myself, trying to force my mind to break free from the panic that was clawing at my chest. It is happening, the receptionist whispered, and I felt her breath against my ear, cold as ice. "There's no way out. Not for you. Not anymore." I felt the room begin to tilt. The walls seemed to sway around me, and the floor, the very foundation, began to tremble beneath my feet. Before I could process what was happening, the doors to the elevator slammed shut with a deafening bang. I turned in a panic, my eyes wide, desperate for escape. But there was nothing. The lobby had disappeared, no receptionist, no elevator, no hallway. Instead, I stood in a vast, empty space. Blackness stretched out before me in all directions, with only a faint, eerie glow coming from somewhere in the distance. My breath hitched in my throat as I realized, I wasn't a lone star. The air felt thick, suffocating, and a sound echoed around me, low, like a chant. I tried to move, but my legs wouldn't respond. My body was paralyzed by a deep, crawling dread that felt alive. My eyes darted around, searching for some sign of escape, but all I could see was endless darkness. And then, I heard it. A sound, a scraping sound, coming from behind me. I spun around, but there was nothing there. No one. Just the silence. But then it came again. A scraping sound, this time much closer. I felt something in the air shift, a presence moving near me. Slowly. Methodically. It was close, too close. "Help me," a voice, not human, whispered in my ear. It wasn't the receptionist this time. The voice was deeper, almost guttural, but it was the same plea. "Help me." I closed my eyes, trying to block it out, but the voice only grew louder. And then I heard it, a soft rustle, like the shifting of fabric, and when I opened my eyes again, I saw a figure standing in front of me. It was a man, or rather, what used to be a man. His skin was stretched tight over his bones, his eyes sunken into his skull, and his lips were cracked and dry. He was sickly. "Don't listen to her," he rasped, his voice cracked, as if the very air around us was choking him. "Don't let her take you. Don't." Before he could finish, he seemed to collapse in on himself, his form twisting and warping like it was made of shadow, until he was nothing but a dark stain in the void. I staggered back, terror gripping my throat. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst, my breath coming in ragged gasps, but I couldn't look away. The dark space around me was closing in, narrowing, as though the very fabric of reality was beginning to unravel. The receptionist's voice came again, this time louder and closer, so close it felt like she was right next to me. "You are mine now, The words felt like ice, freezing my bones, seizing my body with an overpowering force. I could feel her presence pressing against me, suffocating me, dragging me deeper into the cold, into the shadows. "No one leaves here, I screamed, but no sound came out. The darkness was overwhelming. The cold was unbearable. And in that moment, I realized that the building itself, was alive. It was feeding on me. To be continued. I was trapped. There was no other word for it. The darkness was pressing against me from all sides, suffocating me, pulling me deeper into its cold embrace. My heart pounded in my chest, the sound of it filling my ears as I gasped for air that was growing thinner, colder. It was as though the building itself was alive, feeding off my fear, tightening its grip on me with every passing second. I tried to move, to force my limbs to obey, but they felt like lead. My body was paralyzed, not by cold, but by sheer terror. Every instinct in me screamed to run, to escape, but the shadows held me in place, their tendrils curling around my legs, my waist, my chest, slowly squeezing the breath from my lungs. The receptionist's voice came again, now so close I could feel her cold breath against my skin. "You should have never come back, she whispered. Her words dripped with malice, as though she were savoring my fear. "The building has claimed you. You belong to it now." I tried to scream, but no sound came out. My throat was tight, as though something invisible was squeezing it shut. Panic surged through me, but my legs wouldn't move. My mind screamed at me to do something, anything to break free of this nightmare, but the darkness, the shadows, they were alive, swirling around me, suffocating me. "Please." I managed to croak, my voice barely a whisper. "Let me go. Please, I just want to leave." Her cold hand brushed against my cheek, sending a shiver down my spine. Asterisk, you are not leaving, asterisk. Her voice was gentle now, almost comforting, like a mother speaking to a child. But there was nothing comforting about it. It was the voice of something ancient, something that had been here long before I had stepped into this cursed building. I felt my knees buckle beneath me. The floor seemed to tilt again, like the world itself was warping, bending, shifting around me. The walls, too, were alive. They seemed to pulse, their cracks widening as if something was breathing beneath them. Something alive. I closed my eyes, trying to block it all out, but the horror was too strong. It pressed in from all sides, suffocating me, filling every crevice of my mind. The walls were closing in, squeezing the air from my lungs. I opened my eyes again, desperate for some shred of reality, but the lobby, everything, was gone. In its place was an endless expanse of shadows. I was no longer standing in a building. No. This was something else. It was another world. A dark, twisted world where nothing made sense. The air was thick with a damp, suffocating smell, like old, decaying wood and mildew. The floor was covered in a slick, viscous substance, and I could feel it sticking to my feet, dragging me down with every step. I tried to move, to run, but I was trapped. The shadows were everywhere, stretching, twisting, reaching for me. I could hear something moving in the dark, low, skittering sounds like claws dragging across the floor. They were getting closer. I turned, but there was no escape. No doors. No windows. Just endless, consuming darkness. Asterisk, welcome home, asterisk, the receptionist's voice echoed, now coming from every direction. It was as if she were speaking directly into my mind, the words curling around my thoughts, binding them to her will. Asterisk, you're here to stay. You've crossed the threshold. And now, there's no turning back, asterisk. I stumbled backward, my pulse racing, my mind spinning with panic. I had to get out. I had to find a way to escape. And then, I saw it. A figure. A shadow, standing in the distance, but not quite human. It was tall, impossibly tall, with long, thin limbs that stretched unnaturally long. Its face, if it could even be called a face, was a blank canvas, featureless, a smooth, pale mask that reflected nothing but the void. Its body seemed to shimmer, as if it were made of mist, of darkness itself. And yet, I could feel it. The air around it was heavy, thick with malevolent energy. It was watching me. Watching me. I took a step back, my feet slipping on the wet floor, but I couldn't take my eyes off the figure. It moved, but not like a person would. It was gliding. Its movements were smooth, flowing, like it was made of smoke, but at the same time, there was an unnatural, jerky quality to its motions, like it was being pulled by invisible strings. Asterisk, don't be afraid, asterisk, a voice whispered. But it wasn't the receptionist this time. It was the figure, speaking directly into my mind, its voice deep and resonant, like the rumble of thunder in the distance. Asterisk, we've been waiting for you. All this time, asterisk. I turned, trying to run, but the floor was slick, and I couldn't keep my footing. I fell, hard, my hands hitting the ground with a sickening slap. The dark substance that covered the floor seemed to pulse beneath me, like it was alive, and I felt something cold brush against my back. Something watching me. A soft laugh echoed in the distance, a high, eerie chuckle that made my blood run cold. Asterisk, you can't escape, asterisk, the voice said, its words vibrating through my skull. Asterisk, you're already here. and you'll stay here. Forever, asterisk. I twisted around, struggling to get up, but the shadows were closing in around me. I could feel them reaching for me, pulling me deeper into the darkness. And then, suddenly, there was light. A flicker. A bright, blinding flash that cut through the darkness like a knife. I squinted against the sudden brightness, but it was gone as quickly as it had appeared, leaving me standing in another place. Another world. The shadows were gone now. The oppressive weight of the building was gone. I was no longer standing in the dark, decaying corridor. I was somewhere else. The ground beneath me was solid again, and the air, though cold, wasn't as suffocating. The space around me was vast, too vast. I was in a room, but it didn't feel like a room. It felt like I was standing in the center of an endless void, surrounded by nothing but emptiness. The walls, if there were walls, were hidden in the distance, stretched too far to be seen. And in the center of the void, standing motionless, was the receptionist. Her smile was gone now. Her face was twisted. Her mouth was stretched far too wide, exposing rows and rows of sharp, glistening teeth that gleamed like jagged blades. Her eyes were gone, replaced by two dark, hollow sockets, leaking a dark, viscous liquid. And yet, she was still smiling. Asterisk, you're mine now, asterisk, she whispered, her voice soft, almost gentle, but there was an edge to it. A terrifying edge that made every muscle in my body tense, made my skin crawl with the sudden, overwhelming urge to flee. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Asterisk, you'll stay with us, asterisk, she continued, her voice becoming more guttural, the words twisted as though they were being dragged through a mouth filled with venom. Asterisk, forever. We've all been waiting for you, asterisk. I felt something shift in the air, something ancient and powerful stirring beneath the surface. The ground trembled, and the darkness around me seemed to pulse, like it was alive. The figure, the tall shadow, was still there, its glowing eyes now locked on me. It didn't move, but its presence was everywhere. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. The darkness was closing in again, pulling me toward it, pulling me into the depths. My chest tightened, my heart raced, and I could feel the coldness creeping inside me, filling me, consuming me. And then, just as quickly as it had started, the darkness swallowed me whole. I was falling. To be continued.